Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, December 16th, 2021. Time for another show, etc., etc. And something. Oh, man, the news is just coming fast and furious. But it's all news about what happened a year ago, which is kind of interesting. I feel like I'm in a bit of a time warp, which is maybe why it feels like Thursday, Friday, next week, something like that. It's been a long week. It really has. So there's plenty to catch up on, of course, including this delicious cup of tea from my last trove of tea. I got a new treasure trove of tea. Thank you very much, Scott. Scott Anderson sent me another trove of teas to keep me healthy and able to speak, I guess, in the mornings. So anxious to try some of those things. Anxious to find out how you pronounce the brand of tea spelled P-U-K-K-A, which, you know, I imagine is not Pucka, but I hope isn't Puka either. So I don't know exactly I don't know what they were thinking. It must mean something in some other language, and I'm totally insulting that language by speaking about it this way. But it looks like good tea. Thank you very much. And the good news is this year it doesn't have to be as much about like curing ills or clearing the throat. It just can be nice, pleasant flavors OT, so there's some good stuff, and I haven't cracked those boxes open yet, but I better get on it because there's like a year's worth of tea in there to get through with. Anyway, still waiting for my PayPal payment to process so that I can do my part in the exchange of fun things today. Let's see. All right. Well, let's see. I got a nice notice about something that I was supposed to be taking care of for outside business not working, so that's good news. Oh, well. Oh, okay. Never mind. All right. It's only an email bounce that didn't work. Okay. It doesn't matter. The rest of the things work. Back on schedule and forward-facing today. Greg's got a lot of stories. I'm sure I haven't had a chance to run down through what he's got, but I know that at least one of them will touch on, probably about 10 of them will touch on things that I also put aside, including something I saw him tweeting about today. All right, I don't see it in the treasure trove of stories, but it'll probably come up because I saw him retweet it with his message of, "Oh, this is my shocked face." As it turns out, you'll be shocked to know. I got to get back to this later, but an NBC News report, billed as an exclusive, I think, by the reporter who was circulating the story on Twitter. Agency overseeing Trump's D.C. hotel lease failed to examine ethical and constitutional conflicts, a report says. It is a report, I guess one of the House committees taking a look at it, that the General Services Administration, you remember I was trying to come up with, what do they call that now? I think it used to be called the General Accounting Office. It's now the General Services Administration, saying that, the GSA, quote, washed its hands of any responsibility to review whether the emoluments clauses of the Constitution were being followed, the House committee found. I'd love to check into that a little bit, and maybe we'll discuss it with Greg, maybe not. I'll read you the article later on, because it's just one of those things. You know, we talk a lot on this show about how they write laws, and they say, don't worry about it. We've written this such a problem is taken care of. We've got a new law that says it's now against the law to do this thing. And then you look up, well, what happens to a person who just does that anyway? And there's no remedy, there's no penalty or anything like that. This is just particularly irksome because, of course, I should get Armando to call in and scream about this, because we talked about this endlessly. You know, every 6 months or so, a new reason to bring it back up again during the entirety of the Trump administration. And the idea that they washed their hands of any responsibility to check on this. Now, remember that the lease on the building that he used to build it, he built out as the hotel, is explicit in its prohibition against allowing any government employee to hold that lease. And then, of course, the guy who ended up holding the lease was government employee number one, the president of the United States. Like, I don't see how you could fail to see this. And, of course, the reason that the lease couldn't be held by anyone working for the federal government is because it would create an emoluments problem, a domestic emoluments problem. It also happened to create a foreign emoluments problem for him, but it would create an emoluments problem that would violate the Constitution. So, like right up at the top of the lease, the one instruction to the General Services Administration, lease the place out, make sure we get paid, and don't lease it to anyone who's a government employee. And for 4 years, they pretended that they weren't doing that. And what happens to the people at the GSA who are just like, I don't think I have anything to do today. There's nothing for me to look at, nothing for me to examine. And then during the last 2 years of his administration, there was a Democratic Congress saying, by the way, you effed up this whole lease thing. Could you look into that? I don't know what you're talking about. And the fact that they could go on for 5 years and just be, I don't know what you mean. What responsibility is it you thought I had is incredible. And it reminded me of a little bit of the story I read you yesterday, the court decision about whether or not the Treasury Department has to turn over Trump's tax returns to the chair of the Ways and Means Committee. And he lost his case, and he'll lose his appeal, and he'll lose, I don't know what happens at the Supreme Court. They might just decide, what the hell, we'll do whatever he wants. He might even be president again by the time that they get that case. But the part of the story we left out yesterday was that they said, oh yeah, the court finds that the Treasury Department was just completely out of its mind by not complying with the law, and Secretary Mnuchin should obviously have sent those things, and it would be wrong and illegal for the Treasury Secretary not to send those things. So great, he won the government won the case, the House committee won the case, so the upshot is supposed to be that they'll get the tax returns. But what happens to Mnuchin? Like, nothing. There's nothing in the law. Again, it's one of those things that they wrote that said, well, you have to send it. Yeah, well, what about if they just don't? Well, nobody's going to just not send it. It says right here you got to send it. So we don't need to write anything into that. Oh, okay. Right. Well, a guy just didn't send it. And then the answer is, what happens? Well, the court will say he should have. Okay. Well, good law. That was really well written there. All right. Well, anyway, I've ranted enough. Greg Dworkin is here. It's his turn to rant. You can go ahead, Greg. Good morning. How are you?
I ranted yesterday.
Yes, that's right. Oh, yeah, I recall.
I don't know how much you're charging for rent, so I don't know if I can really do it every day.
Oh, I don't know. Oh, we have a very buzzy connection today.
Oh, do we?
Yeah.
Should I call back?
Yeah, let's do that. We may deserve to hear your voice clear as a bell, I think. Have you got any bells? All right, so lots of sound effects going on today. All right, there we go. A quick answer. Let's try this.
How's that?
I think that's better. Let me say another thing.
Okay, well, it sounds the same to me at this end.
Okay, well, then in that case, yeah, this is much clearer. I don't know. There was just a little bit of a buzz to it, and that would have driven everybody crazy.
Well, the show always has buzz, so that's one of the things we do.
There's a lot of buzz going on.
I had put a bunch of things aside at the very beginning of things I might mention, but not really spend a lot of time talking about. And top of that list was the Rebecca Shabbat tweet. Check out my NBC News exclusive from yesterday. The federal agency overseeing the lease for the Trump International Hotel failed to examine ethical constitutional conflicts, and that's why I sent it and said, here's my shocked face.
Right. Yeah.
Because the hallmark of the Trump administration is not doing what they're supposed to do.
Yes.
And, a lot of this stuff may wind up at the Supreme Court. My view of the Supreme Court, not being a lawyer and just being like a layperson watching what they do, is I tend to think that Trump's going to lose a lot of the cases that are sent up to the Supreme Court, because I don't see the Supreme Court as necessarily being pro-Trump. I just think that they are really into religious theocracy. So if it doesn't have anything to do with religious theocracy, he just may lose on precedent.
Yeah. Well, your voice has just gone fuzzy again, so I guess maybe it's just internet, who knows what, and maybe it'll clear up again. I'll let you know. Or you don't have even
Right,
knocked any wires.
hey,
in
listen,
this
I can always spend the entire show calling back because it's got that really pretty sound
You
in
should
the
do that.
background, and we can just like make a theme out of it.
Doon, doo, doo. Yeah, I mean, well, give it a minute, see what happens. And
Right. The next thing
shift
that
around
I
in your
had
seat.
on the list of things that I was not going to spend a lot of time talking about
Yes.
was Daily Kos's Brandy Bookman pointing out Jeffrey Clark was slated for deposition today before the January 6th committee after a delay earlier this month due to his health.
Yes, right.
And today, a committee aide said he's been granted a short postponement of the scheduled deposition as a result of his medical condition. So scheduling a short postponement is fair. I think that's reasonable.
I guess. I mean,
But of course,
he just had one.
suspicion is that whether or not crapping in your pants is actually a medical condition, or whether or not having
Well-
palpitations about your legal exposure is really a medical condition. But we'll give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he just has COVID.
Maybe. I guess that would be fitting. Or, unless he's just, well, we'll find out later whether he had something or whether he was just like, if I just keep saying I'm sick, can I have a short postponement? How many times will they do it before they say, wait a minute? No. And then I'll just say, all right, well, I guess you'll just have to hold me in contempt at that point.
Right.
Be an interesting trick.
Then I have this wonderful piece from Quora, which I was
clear
going to
again.
just mention in passing.
Okay.
Which just as I was searching for something else, this just popped up and I had to put it aside. It's have you ever bitten someone's head off for erroneously referring to a magazine as a clip? and it's an entire discussion about this, the gist of which, with 15 answers, is
Yeah.
basically I really don't, except if they do it in relation to law. If you're talking about some law, then language matters, and so I'm all over you. But otherwise, no. Mm-hmm. And of course, a lot of people would say otherwise, yes, depending upon what their experience is.
Yes.
And part of the, shall we say, interesting part, and I say this being 2 days off of 1214 here in Newtown, over on the right side they have a bunch of related questions.
Oh, okay, yes, right.
Like, will a 44 Magnum really blow your head off? Have you ever seen somebody get shot by a gun in person? Have you ever witnessed somebody get shot right in front of you? What does it look like when somebody gets shot in the head? What does it feel like? Pretty amazing things to ask.
Yeah, really.
It's but
yucky.
hey, this is America.
Right. Free speech.
And I'd rather somebody
First
read
Amendment.
about it than actually experience it, to be honest.
I guess, yeah, sure. Although I would perhaps, I don't know what to say. Maybe
Well,
get a search
perhaps they're
warrant
all
for
writing
somebody's-
mystery magazines or novels, and
Mystery
they
clips.
just need the authenticity as background for the stuff they're writing.
Yes, or they need a search of their crawl space. But yeah, go on.
Yeah,
That's a
either
weird
way.
thing to ask about. You were right. What does it look like? It looks like it's a mess. What are you
Yeah,
talking
well,
about?
what does an insurrection look like?
Yeah.
I'm just asking for a friend.
Oh, right. Yeah. I want to be sure that's what we were doing.
Right. So another
Weird.
thing that I was just going to mention in passing, which is actually perhaps a little more pleasant,
Let's just keep passing.
but not pleasant because of the reasons for it.
Oh.
Biden went down to Kentucky to view
Looking for a
the
Solus deal.
devastation there.
Right.
And there's a piece in the Washington Post in Trump country, a willingness to set aside politics as Biden visits.
Oh, for
And
money.
they focus on Cliff Giambrone, who's a construction worker from Hamburg, Pennsylvania, who drove down.
You think he pronounces it that way? All right. Yeah.
And he says, pausing in a search for a lost
Why?
photo album in the rubble of a home. And I read about a photo in Kentucky that showed up in Indiana on somebody's lawn or something. Giambrone added, I'm political, but there are times you have to set that aside. This is one of those moments. I hope it's not temporary. I didn't vote for him, but he's still my president. I want to support him. And there's a whole bunch of that sentiment throughout the article talking about different people saying, look, there's no way I would ever vote for him, but I don't care. I'm glad he's here.
Wow.
He's still my president.
What diner does he eat in?
Well,
I
there
gotta
aren't any
send
diners
some.
left.
Oh, that's the problem. He feels exactly that way, exactly the way people used to feel back in the good old days, which we're trying to get back to. But the bad news is we sent a reporter to his diner and it was destroyed in a tornado.
Well,
So,
but
find
most
that
of the people
diner.
down there are basically happy to see him, and they're putting politics aside. It's nice to know that could still happen. It's horrible that the circumstances that call for it. I mean, 800,000 people dying from a pandemic won't do it, but at least this still
Right.
will.
Well, yeah, a tornado. That was in the Wizard of Oz. Everyone's familiar with that. Pandemic. If that had been there,
humbug.
Yeah, then we would have known.
Yeah. Anyway, interesting stuff. The focus, of course, I think needs to be on the Mark Meadows stuff still.
Sure.
And we started to talk about that a little bit. I mean, the other thing that I was going to mention that there's really not a lot to say about is that they're not ready to do Build Back Better yet in the Senate because basically they don't have the votes. Okay. So they're going to turn aggressively, as they say, to voting rights, which they don't have the votes.
Yeah, but
and so because they don't have the votes, not a lot to say about it.
New subject, though, so we don't have the votes for that either, but we can look into it. Okay, I'm glad they're getting to that, sort of. I don't know what's...
So Mark Meadows, Mark Meadows and Jim Jordan and a whole bunch of other people are still in the news. And I found this one interesting. This is role as Trump's gatekeeper puts Meadows in legal jeopardy and at odds with Trump. Talks about the fact that between his book and some of the things he's done, like send the committee lots of information and then say, oh, well, but I'm not sending you anymore. Trump world is still mad at him because he makes Trump look bad.
Okay. Yeah.
So somebody who is qualified to do this, okay, a fellow named Chris,
Joe.
who wrote a book called The Gatekeepers.
I'm sorry, I talked over you. Chris who?
Whipple.
All right. Oh.
How the White House chiefs of staff define every presidency. He interviewed all 18 living chiefs of staff for his book.
Quote unquote living.
To get an idea of, what they do and how they do it.
All right.
He comes to the conclusion that basically, if you want to simplify and skip the whole article because it's too long to read,
yes.
Whipple argued that Meadows has earned himself an inglorious spot in the history books. It used to be that there were a lot of contenders for worst chief of staff in history. No longer the case.
Well, I mean, with the other MM guy, I can't even remember, Mick Mulvaney, he was pretty bad, but maybe he was acting chief of staff.
Well, H.R. Haldeman.
Oh, yes, I mean, no doubt about all that. There's
history,
a close competitor in the same administration. Yeah. It's very bad. All I'm saying is that there are two close contenders from this administration. I think Haldeman beats Mulvaney, but, I mean, to be number 3 on the list...
Right, is no small feat. Because there's others,
Yeah. Wow. Well, not terribly surprising given that he clearly was the worst president in history and was very quickly at the top of those lists.
Well, the article goes on to explain the whole deal here is that the role of the chief of staff is to be a gatekeeper, which is the title of the book, but also be a truth teller. So what you're supposed to do is distill what's important, tell it to the president, unvarnished, and then, try to deal with it. And he'll say, that's terrible, go fix it. And, I got to go play golf or whatever.
Yeah.
And he didn't do any of that. Everybody knew, and this is relevant to the discussion we had yesterday about everybody that was texting Meadows. Why do you text Meadows? Because Meadows took all your texts. Everybody knew Meadows took all your texts. It didn't matter whether he answered you or not.
Yeah.
Everybody knew you could reach him. Everybody knew that he would take the information and then present it to Trump because that's what he did. He didn't filter anything. He found what he thought Trump would like and passed it along. And whether it was garbage or not, that's what he did. And so everybody reached out to Meadows because rather than be the gatekeeper, Meadows was basically the wide open window you could use to get information into the Oval Office.
That is interesting because I was asking last night, like late last night. This kept me up at night. For all of the interesting stories about all this stuff, I guess I was wondering about all those texts. Like, what was it about? I don't know, about him, I guess, that made people think in the middle of an insurrection that should have been an all-out, like, the White House is in the secure bunker in the basement situation room, getting all the intelligence kind of stuff, that in a situation like that so many people believed, yeah, Mark Meadows will take my text. I can absolutely communicate with him.
It's not like he's part of the decision-making
this is the answer.
Is contributing expertise to how to deal with a crisis.
That's got to be it. Because I thought, the White House chief of staff really going to be unreachable at this moment? What are you doing texting him? But the answer is no, he wasn't. That's what he does. He's the chief text reader guy for the president. And
right. So he's in the middle of it. Wow. He's getting all these texts. A lot of the texts that he has,
he's got no job to do. Yeah.
Okay. Are like weird and crazy and awful. The time frame isn't always clear on them. You don't know when he got them, whether it was the day after November 6th or whether it was on the day of January 6th. Sometimes they tell you that. Sometimes they don't. Okay. And so, for example, one of the texts.
They don't know this for sure? Okay.
Well, they do, but they're not telling us. Or at least it's not clear in the story.
I have you now. Yes.
Right? The text, which NBC News on Wednesday confirmed, was sent by Jim Jordan, who was one of numerous messages to Meadows that a House Select Committee shared publicly this week.
Right.
The text had been written by Joseph Schmitz, a former Pentagon Inspector General and former Trump campaign aide. Think of this in context of the PowerPoint, which Meadows didn't write but passed along, and was passed on to Meadows by Jordan.
So
a
Jordan
source told NBC News.
Yes, this is one Jordan says he didn't write. He just got it from another nut and sent it to the
message says
nut.
Pence on January 6th, quote, should call out all electoral votes that he believes are unconstitutional as no electoral votes at all.
Sure.
End quote. Claiming such an act would be in accordance with judicial precedents and guidance from founding father Alexander Hamilton.
Yes, he misspells precedents, by the way.
The entire text says on January 6, 2021, Vice President Mike Pence, as President of the Senate, should call out all electoral votes that he believes are unconstitutional as no electoral votes at all, in accordance with guidance from founding father Alexander Hamilton and judicial precedents. No legislative act, wrote Alexander Hamilton in Federalist Number 78, contrary to the Constitution, can be valid, and then goes on to cite other statutes and then says, following this rationale, an unconstitutionally appointed elector, like an unconstitutionally enacted statute, is no elector at all.
No, but go on.
Well, following this rationale,
which isn't
Jordan says you shouldn't hold me accountable for that because I just retweeted it, and retweets are not endorsements. Everybody knows that.
Yeah, that's the
Which,
thing.
Following this rationale, I would say in a logically conceived defense, like the absence of something, is nothing at all.
Yeah.
But, of course, I'm not a lawyer, and I don't have to prosecute this.
I read some
I would say that if you keep sending stuff like that, you're a suspect, whether you think it's an endorsement or not, unless you say on it, this is stupid, which he didn't.
All right. All right. He didn't stop to comment on. I will, though. I saw this thing yesterday, and I got to say, so I think that they said it originated with a former maybe DOD Inspector General.
Yeah, that's the fellow Joseph.
That's the name.
What's his name? Joseph Schmitz.
Okay.
A former DOD Inspector General.
Yeah, and I don't know, whether Inspector Generals typically
Remember,
are
Inspector
lawyers.
Generals are referred to as general, but it's not a general the way general is a general.
No. And they're not referred to as general. But okay, I mean, Ted Cruz and people like that.
Attorney General, Inspector General, when they were in the committee, everybody referred to them as general. What do you think of this?
I got to tell you, I mean, this is a D minus or F law school short answer essay. First of all, as I keep insisting, they spell precedents wrong. Judicial precedents, they spell Precedence, like the precedence of the judiciary among the branches or something like that, as opposed to the precedents that judicial officers set when they rule.
Oh, I thought it was judicial president, like marshal of the court.
Right, sure. And I mean, this thing, to take this, you're really in bad shape if you are writing your brief and the best you've got, as famous as it is, and as much as everyone loves to depend on the founders, if you're citing the Federalist alone, you're out in left field. You're like, there's been no legal decisions that say this. Now, he does cite some cases, but again, these are cases about unconstitutional statutes, and we don't have a statute before us. But he then just goes and says, well, following that logic, this applies to something totally different. Oh, well, it really doesn't, and I don't know why you think it does, but yeah, Federalist 78 isn't going to help you. And cases that reaffirm the right of, the prerogative of judicial review aren't going to help you here either, because they're not supposed to be interfering anyway in the business of the legislative body, and they determine their own rules. There's a million things wrong with this. This is maybe the worst analysis I've seen, and I'm willing to excuse the Eastman memo as, well, it's fantastical, but it's got a shot. This doesn't even have a shot. This is just not based in reality. I mean, they're asking for the same thing, but the rationale for getting it out of Pence is horrific. You fail. This is an F paper. I'm sorry. Come back to me again tomorrow.
So National Review had one which basically said this is a bunch of lies. This is crazy stuff.
Okay.
And Jonah Goldberg had one in the Dispatch, which I flagged. Donald Trump's megaphone. Fox News hosts knew that Trump lies were lies, and they amplified them anyhow,
Yes.
and goes after them. So it's nice to see even the conservative bubble gets a little bit penetrated by some of this stuff.
That's good.
And it is diffusing out.
I am glad.
Let's see, what does he say here? That's the thing. I know a huge share of the people you saw on TV praising Trump were being dishonest. I don't merely suspect it, I know it, says Goldberg. Because they would say one thing to my face or in my presence and another thing when the cameras and microphones were on.
I would too.
And even when I didn't hear it directly, I was off in 1 degree of separation. Like, guess what so-and-so said during the commercial break? Punditry in politics is a very small world, especially on the right. And if you add up all the congressmen, senators, columnists, producers, editors, you'll probably end up with fewer people than the student population of a decent-sized liberal arts college, which, by the way, has just been sent home because there's a COVID outbreak. I added that.
Plus, they failed their exam, as I just told you. Yes.
So he says, I never deliberately lied on Fox, but over time I felt like I was becoming complicit, so he doesn't go there anymore.
Okay. I mean, he's still Jonah Goldberg. But,
right, so it's kind of interesting.
He's a better version of himself, but only slightly better. I would also do the same thing. I would say one thing to his face and something else on the microphone. I admit it.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. We continue with the big news day about news from a year ago, but we're learning it now because people are publishing books, I guess.
Well, but also the televised hearings are coming, and we had a brief televised live debate about it on the floor of the Congress, and of course the anniversary itself. So with all of those things coming up, it's in the news. So Jonah Goldberg goes on to write, the significance of the text from the Fox News anchors isn't that they recognize the truth of that day. What's relevant is the contrast of that private behavior with their public behavior over the 11 months that followed.
Yes, sure.
For example, Laura Ingraham made a huge deal of the fact that she condemned the violence on her show on the evening of January 6th, and she did. She sprinkled it with all sorts of fan service nonsense about Antifa, but she did say political passions boiled over today and will only serve the lives of MAGA supporters more difficult and imperil the moment and the movement they fought so hard for. What she didn't say is that the mob's passion boiled over because of Donald Trump's lies and the megaphone she and her colleagues gave to those lies. From her text, it's reasonable to assume she believed rightly the mob was Trump's to command because the Trump believed it was doing Trump's bidding.
Yes.
But that truth is what she left out that night and every night. In other
Trump
words,
also believed
the
it.
central truth of the text isn't that what the mob was doing was condemnable, but that Trump was responsible. And by the time the cameras went on, Laura was still willing to condemn the president's mob, but not the president.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the pressing conversation we needed the day a mob chanted "Hang Mike Pence" and bludgeoned cops with flagpoles. And then Laura spent the next 11 months cleaning up the president's mess. Okay? And so the stuff she said on TV was not the stuff she was texting Mark Meadows, and that's why Mark Meadows texts, So, then he talks a little bit about his own approach and what he should or shouldn't have done. I'm not all that interested in that.
Jonah?
But, I think that the background there, and here's the National Review piece that I had mentioned. It's called Gone Too Far by Michael Brendan Doherty. The Capitol riot happened because President Trump simply lied and lied and lied. And that's the basic substance of all of this. These texts are happening because in real time there is an insurrection going on. People are getting hurt. The folks who are hunkered down are scared, from the reporters to the Congress people to the folks who are witnessing it from outside. Mm-hmm. They're all texting Meadows because Meadows takes their texts and they all know it. And they're trying to tell Trump to stand down. And the reason they're trying to tell Trump to stand down is because they all think Trump is responsible for this.
Yeah.
That's the essence of all of this.
Yeah. Okay. Cool so far.
Right? And so that's why when Liz Cheney cites specific, quotes about what a statute says, that, you're not supposed to interfere with what is essentially a legal process, because that is breaking the law, that becomes relevant because that points to Donald Trump. That doesn't mean that they'll try and prosecute him for it. That doesn't mean that they can prosecute him for it. But she's outlined in her discussions several times by citing that statute what's going on here. Mm-hmm. So people get it. People understand, and that's why it's penetrating the bubble.
Okay. I am pleased to
Michael
see
Brandon
this.
Doherty goes on to say, a little later, Don texted again, "We need an Oval Office address. He has to lead now. It's gone too far and gotten out of hand." And it's that last statement that reveals the whole truth of January 6th for Trump supporters. Donald Trump's claims of massive election fraud, only in the states he lost, by the way, were treated by people around him as a kind of naughty habit that had to be tolerated or indulged. That's where Mark Meadows comes in again, because that's what he does as chief of staff. When the people who treated these claims very seriously started acting like they were true when they tried to stop the steal by interrupting the ceremony in which Congress certifies the results of the presidential election, and the point there is that's a legally protected process, then it had gone too far and gotten out of hand. For those few hours, several people in the conservative media world who had influence with the president tried to intervene on behalf of reality, and by the way, through Mark Meadows, because everybody knows he took their texts. Mm-hmm. So that's why if you say somebody texted Meadows but he didn't respond, we don't know what that – we do know what that means. Everybody texted him because everybody knew that he was taking them. Please get him on TV. The Capitol riot is destroying everything you accomplished. And I have to say, in the list of all the things that people texted Meadows, I only saw one response from Meadows.
That's the thing that
the one response from Meadows was to Don Jr. saying, "Yeah, I'm trying."
Right, that's useless. But
yes, and that is useless.
I'm curious what his usual response rate is, and whether people on January 6th thought, "This is odd. He's not even responding." Which I don't know what it means, and I don't know whether it tells us anything or not. But I guess we'd look into it. But the only person we can ask is Meadows, and he'll probably not tell us the truth. So he'll probably just say, "I was working so hard on behalf of the American people that I couldn't answer all the texts." But I wonder what his usual response rate is.
So Michael Brendan Doherty goes on to say, hearing the text read aloud at this late date in the year does provide a sense of clarity. Many of Trump's lies before this seemed to have little cost. Many of them had been brazened out until they produced a kind of success. But the lies that Trump told that day to that crowd had produced this specific televised disaster. It was a predicted disaster, unfortunately, but almost everyone knew it was wrong while it was happening. Yeah. In the months after January 6th, the politically correct move for Trump's cable news apologists has been to ignore the fact that people who set about investigating the vote fraud had turned up nothing. But the riot at the Capitol happened because Donald Trump simply lied, lied, and lied. On that very day, he lied about what the vice president's powers were, and presidents have a duty to protect the Constitution. On that day, Trump was subverting it. And it's pretty straightforward. Again, this is conservative media. So, between National Review, Jonah Goldberg, you can say, oh, yeah, well, they're the never-Trumpers, and what about this and that and everything else? This stuff is penetrating.
It's okay. Yeah, it's good. I'm glad. I mean, what else could I ask for? They are never-Trumpers, and that's the grain of salt you take it with. But so what? All right, I like salt. Good.
There's a famous parable about trying to have fish without salt.
Oh, yeah, well, yeah. Anyhow, I'm glad that he did it, and that also occurred to me last night, as he was saying. Everybody knew at the time that it was wrong, and I mean, it obviously you would think, even though I guess the people in the crowd didn't think so. I was thinking last night, just sort of, I don't know, I had this vague notion, thinking about it like a kid, like I guess just growing up. I always assumed, I tweeted this last night, I guess it rang true with a lot of people. Basically, didn't you always just kind of vaguely assume that if you assaulted the U.S. Capitol in the middle of a super important ceremony that the vice president was at and everything, and you just were like, I'm just barging in, I'm going to kick the doors of the Congress and I'm going to go in there, I'm going to tell them to shut up,
look, if you were breaking reinforced windows to get into the building, wouldn't you think that somewhere deep down inside, I'm not just a tourist?
Right. Well, I
happen to find myself in the wrong place at the wrong time.
And between that and the, I can't believe they shot Ashley Babbitt. Didn't you think
with glass cuts all over my hand?
Yeah. I always just imagined that if you showed up and you tried to smash your way in, that they would at least tackle you, if not shoot you. And then if you showed up with a mob, well, they can't catch all of us. Well, yeah, that's the part where the army men come and they shoot you all.
Oh, yeah, army men.
So, like kids think. The army comes and they just machine gun you, and that's the end of it. And I don't, Ashley Babbitt, they all say, oh, what a martyr. She is in the Air Force. Like, if you attacked her Air Force base and said, I'm coming to kill the general, you can't stop me, you would get shot, right?
She would try and stop you.
Yeah, she would shoot you. I assume, if she had
Well, we don't know.
I don't know. Maybe not. She'd help you. But
So Marcy Wheeler has a post.
Oh, you're kidding.
Called Finally, Everyone is Talking About Trump's Obstruction on January 6th. Okay. Again, the reason why those texts are so important. Twice in the last 24 hours, Liz Cheney's read from texts that Mark Meadows already turned over to the January 6th committee, showing that everybody from Sean Hannity to Don Jr. were desperately contacting Meadows, begging him to get Trump to do something to halt the assault on the Capitol.
Halt the assault. That's a bumper sticker. Yeah, right? Okay.
These texts, said Liz Cheney, leave no doubt the White House knew exactly what was happening at the Capitol. Members of Congress, the press, we know who that is, and others wrote to Mark Meadows as the attack was underway. Now, there may be more texts that we haven't heard yet.
True.
The Jim Jordan one was just released late yesterday.
Yeah, right. True.
Okay, and Marcy writes,
why.
Back when I begged TV lawyers to start focusing on the application
she didn't text
the
the
obstruction.
Lawyers. That's the problem.
I laid out the things that Trump had or may have done that might be proof of obstruction, agreeing and ordering subordinates to plan and participate in an effort to obstruct the vote certification, encouraging the Proud Boys to believe they are his army,
yes,
personally sowing the big lie about voter fraud, asking subordinates and Republican politicians to lie about the vote to encourage supporters to feel they were robbed, encouraging surrogates and campaign staffers to fund buses to make travel to D.C. easier, using the January 6th rally to encourage as many people as possible to come to D.C., applauding violence in advance of January 6th, tacitly encouraging it that day, recruiting members of Congress to raise challenges to the vote count, which is why the congressional texts are going to be so important, asking members of Congress to delay evacuation even as the rioters enter the building, heightening the chance of direct physical threat and likely contributing to Ashley Babbitt's death, asking Mike Pence to do something unconstitutional, possibly muddling the line of command in which civilian agency would coordinate response. That still has to get looked at in terms of the Guard, and possibly ignoring immediate requests for help from leaders of Congress. So that's not a guarantee that Trump will be prosecuted, but all three branches of government now agree on the framework. Judicial, because some of the Capitol Hill rioters are being prosecuted under it. The executive, because they're the ones doing the prosecution. And Congress, because January 6th is saying so, the committee. Right? So this is all important, and I think, stuff to still happen. But, it's going to resonate, and there's absolutely positively more to come, and in short order, because the January 6th anniversary is coming just in a couple of weeks, and the televised hearings are coming just in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, so I think they'll be exciting and
They'll be compelling.
There's still time for mainstream media types to write that they'll be boring and you shouldn't watch them.
Because Jim Jordan isn't on the table taking his shirt off and jumping up and down. But he's not. And so it's not going to distract from, like, okay, we had 3 hours of a great presentation. Now we have to turn it off for another 3 hours of garbage. Mm-hmm. And what aboutism before we can come back to another 3 hours of compelling. It's going to be all compelling because those guys aren't there.
That's true. That's going to make it really good,
it's easier to watch.
Solid television.
Right? So, whenever you turn it on, you're going to see this stuff.
I will watch. Well, I will watch because
so that's all I have to say today about that. But there's a lot going on with these texts, and I think that the penetration of this into the conservative bubble, and at the same time, the compelling narrative about what was going on with Trump at the center of it, and his chief of staff being the coordinating body there. Passing everything along from all the nutcases, including the PowerPoint, which is only part and parcel of the whole thing, and basically the committee wants folks to testify that I got this, it was nuts, but nuts or not, here's what I did with it. That's what they want to know. What did you do with it? Did you tell Trump? Did you show it to Trump? Everybody showed it to Mark Meadows, which is one step away from Trump. What did Meadows do with it? That's why he's in contempt.
Okay, well, I mean, he's in contempt because he wouldn't come and answer
those
questions.
He wouldn't tell them.
But okay.
But that's what they want to know.
Yes. Well, that's a good question. He's just not going to tell us, though. So
right. They weren't. In other words, this isn't a fishing expedition.
No. I mean, that's why it's important that they got
vague.
his phone.
It's too broad. No, it's very specific. You got all this stuff. Did you tell Trump?
I don't know.
That's not a fishing expedition, and it's not too broad. Just tell us that.
I guess so. Well, he'll be in trouble for not showing up. They won't be able to get away with the excuse of they didn't have the right to ask me. Although they are trying that too with a different tack, slightly different tack. But I'm also a little confused about why Meadows turned over anything. I just don't know why. I mean, I know that he was cooperating at first. Why? Why was he doing that?
To me that I don't know, but that struck me as the retweets are not endorsement defense.
Okay.
I didn't write this.
Yeah.
Here's this crazy PowerPoint, which I may have shown to the president, but I didn't write it.
Right. Why are you?
It's clear. You can check the metadata. I didn't write this. I'm in the clear because I'm an idiot and I don't really think beyond,
Guess. Yeah, maybe that's it, right? It won't be my fault.
Here's this other thing this other guy wrote. Jim Jordan sent it to me, and I sent it along to the president, but I didn't write it, and Jim Jordan didn't write it. So, stop picking on us.
Or even if he claims he didn't pass it along, well, why are you the clearinghouse for all this crazy? What's going on?
Well, it's my job.
Yeah, I guess so. Well, anyway.
If it's your job, you'd be a good person to ask about all this stuff. Well, you can't ask me that.
Because it's my job. Right.
My president told me I don't have to answer. Well, but you do.
Yeah. Well, okay.
If you don't, you're in contempt.
Right. Right. So that seems to be that.
And everybody else, since you don't work by yourself, the myth of somehow there's this one guy doing everything who has no staff, no secretaries, no people around him, no anybody helping him. All those people, they're going to be subpoenaed and they're going to tell us what you did.
I guess so. Well,
already interviewed 300 of them.
Yeah. I don't know. We'll see how they unravel this. I guess we're just going to have to watch. Well, all right. I can't believe that this is what we have to wait and see.
Yeah, isn't that?
We must know.
But now it's interesting.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
It's more than they're just spinning their wheels. No, actually, they're doing a whole lot.
So this is good promo. This is a good trailer for the hearings. They did a good job producing the trailer.
You should watch.
Okay.
Of course, it's only going to be covered on Disney Plus.
Well,
and it's going to be edited by Peter Jackson.
And John Lennon is in it, which is weird.
Yeah, which is very weird. Okay, so
yes.
Let's switch gears here and talk about Get Back. No, let's switch gears and talk about Andy Slavitt.
All right, that is a change. What's going on? What's he doing?
So Andy had a interesting list of things to talk about, and I have an interesting list of things to talk about.
That's your job.
He says, COVID up. This is my hobby. I don't have a job.
Right.
I'm
Yeah,
retired.
you left your job. That's right. I'm done with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I call in because I like talking to David. I mean, this is true. This is like a true fact. It's not because I'm hired to pretend I like him or anything like that.
That's true. I know. And nobody pays enough for that.
COVID update, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you don't pay enough for the rent to cover the rent.
Right.
COVID update.
Okay.
Omicron will peak in the United States in a third wave in January, according to a consensus of 10 scientists we interviewed.
All right. I'm busy that day, so good.
So far, Omicron is doubling every 2 to 4 days, extraordinarily fast.
Shoot.
People with prior infections or have been vaccinated but not boosted are right in the path of the spread. And I forget whether he gets to this in the tweet storm, but it's helpful to emphasize the people most at risk are those over 65.
All right. I'm not.
Which is, of course, why I'm paying attention, because I'm over 65.
That's why you have so much time for your hobby.
Yeah, exactly. So this makes the spread 2 to 3 times as fast as Delta.
Wow. Okay.
Right? Even with a limited understanding of the severity of Omicron, feels like this implies some concerning news and some better news. All relative.
You're right. Yeah.
Okay? It's 3% of the samples taken in the U.S., but 12% in some parts of the country, like New York. I told you New York has pretty good capability to test these things compared to the rest of the country, which is pretty bad compared to Europe. In Europe and the U.S., it appears to be fitter than Delta, more fit.
Fit. What? What does that mean? Fitter.
That means that if they compete, Omicron wins.
Oh,
right? If you have
like
both
in that
viruses
all right.
spreading at the same
Just like
time,
it sounds like.
in 3 weeks, which one dominates?
So survival
Omicron.
of the fittest, it's the fitter of the two. It will come
Exactly.
to be the dominant strain. I get it. All right.
Yeah. For some period of time,
It's unusual.
we live with both variants, but eventually Omicron may have a binding advantage. Apparently it gets down to the respiratory passages, not deep into the lung, into the alveoli, but gets into the respiratory passages better than Delta does.
All right.
So a majority of the scientists we spoke to see Omicron soon outcompeting Delta, and some see a twin pandemic with both of them hanging out.
Oh, that's not good. Well, I mean, none of it's good. What's
None
the
of it's good.
difference, really? Yeah, okay.
So doubling every 3 days is a little jarring. That means 100,000 cases at Christmas is 400,000 cases by New Year's.
So,
So
stupid numbers.
holiday travel and family gatherings will be like gathering kindling together in a path during a blazing fire. We know that. That's what happened last year.
All right, rake the forests, everyone. Get the kindling out of the way.
Meanwhile,
Yeah.
large parts of the public are fatigued, unvaccinated, and
Right.
disbelieving, and many will only get mild illness and don't think it's worth disrupting their lives. And that's the thing you get when you look at Twitter and you follow people
Yes.
and say, I don't know, this is just like mild. Why are you asking me to do these things? I hate you.
It's very
I'm done.
odd.
I've had it. Okay, so Andy says, our principal fear now is the ability, which is, by the way, our principal fear when it started. Our principal fear is the ability of our hospitals to meet the overwhelming rush of cases in a short period.
Yes.
Several states are telling me they're canceling elective procedures. Arizona just did. And we haven't even begun to see Omicron cases.
That's, yeah.
Yep. We talked about it on the show. New Hampshire, upstate New York, we're all getting hit pretty hard right now.
Right,
Some of these
right.
are starting to get a little bit better. I noticed Germany's starting to get a little bit better in terms of cases coming down. But there's still Omicron to come. And those who have been boosted with an mRNA vaccine will have strong protection. But by Christmas, at the current rate, less than a quarter of the country is going to be boosted.
Shoot. Okay.
So what are we seeing? Colleges like Cornell and now NYU.
Oh, I didn't know about NYU.
Sports leagues and schools are already seeing outbreaks and are temporarily suspending. Cornell's notable because a lot of it's Omicron. Offices that can are keeping people home as hospitals fill. Governors will come to grips with other stronger steps they need to take. Many won't act until it's too late. We already know that because, like with Ron DeSantis, are trying to and
Sure, he'll be winning the
what's
pandemic.
his name? In Missouri, they're trying to pass laws that prevent you from taking the steps you need to take, which is insane.
Yes, you should
And
storm their
here's the
capitals.
thing. You take one thing out of this tweet. Policy reactions are hard when people's different circumstances suggest they want a targeted response when in a pandemic, only a broad response is going to protect the onslaught to hospitals. As an aside, I have a Twitter friend, Aaron Astor. He's a historian of American history, specializing in the Civil War era. And he tweets out of Tennessee, and he's very
Civil War.
pro-vaccine but very anti-mask. And he noted in a tweet that had like 1,500 responses,
Yeah.
about 5% of the people around me mask. I don't particularly like masks, and I hate it when the schools do it. What's going on in your area?
What?
And in New England, the people responding are saying 80 to 100% of the folks are wearing masks when I go to the store.
Yeah.
In other parts of the country, it's like, well, 5% like you, and I don't understand why we're doing this. This is crazy. And so the point is, people do have different circumstances. They see different things. They have a different normal. And suggesting they want a targeted response is exactly on point. That's what they want. In my area, this is happening. Why are you asking me to do this? And the answer is only a broad response will protect the hospital at the hospitals. People travel, especially during the holidays.
Yes.
So what you think is local isn't local. What happens in Vegas doesn't stay in Vegas.
Okay,
and measles in Disneyland doesn't stay in Disneyland.
Right. Though it should. It's fun in Disneyland.
Well, and they charge you for it. But, it's just not the same. So in an election year, too many governors are too slow to take tough policy responses. December and January are a time for proactive and unpopular action. And if there's a blessing here, it's the quicker wave come at us, the quicker they peak and decline. Delta blew through in 2 months. Most scientists think Omicron will rise and fall at least that quickly. And watching South Africa and the United Kingdom will help us to know the United Kingdom is sounding the alarms. They're quite worried. Boris Johnson's popularity is dropping. They hate what he's doing. They hate what's happening to them. It's just watch what happens there. In Germany, we talked about this the other day. People are getting very upset about what's going on there, although things do seem to be getting a little bit better. One of the things that happened is the new chancellor took over, and one of the first things they did with a new tough health minister is they took a survey of how much vaccine they have, and they don't have enough, and they didn't know that.
I see. Oh, well, good to find out. Would you like some?
Oh, my goodness.
I'll sell you some.
We want to vaccinate more people. We don't have any.
All right, that's a problem.
We're going to be out of it in a couple of weeks.
As opposed to, I think everybody assumed that was the problem in South Africa, and I did see South African authorities saying, no,
we got too much. We should send it to Germany.
Yeah, I guess that's the answer. Oh, they should be able to communicate with one another.
Right. So if cases peak in the third week in January, hospitalizations peak weeks later. Some see a short but significant disruption with boosters, more rapid tests, which is the part they're failing on. The winter wave and hospital crush could end up short-lived, and that would be good.
Yes.
So if I were communicating this challenge to the country, he says, I'd emphasize that whatever sacrifice is required is short. And it's also time to get the tools accelerated into the fields, boosters, rapid tests, and therapies. Meanwhile, the reactionary Republican responses like that of Eric Schmidt in Missouri, who wants to end reporting of cases entirely, should be called out for what they are, ignorance on a lethal scale.
Yeah.
And he names the people he's interviewed. Osterholm, it's Mike Osterholm, Agus, Paul Offit, Peter Hotez, Natalie Dean, Jedalina, Celine Gounder, Bob Wachter, Bitch Patrick. I know them all. Hear them and others with their full rundown on his podcast.
All right.
Okay. So all of that is going on. And 2 articles, one longer that perhaps we'll get to on Monday.
Okay.
This is Ed Young. America's not ready for Omicron.
I don't want it.
The new variant poses a far graver threat than the collective level, than the individual one. Again, pointing out the same thing Andy did. The kind of test U.S. has repeatedly failed. And perhaps more to the point, this is a real easy to read Joseph Allen op-ed in the Washington Post. Our playbook to fight COVID-19 is outdated. Here are 10 updates for 2022. This is what we should be doing.
Okay, I'll read that.
Right. First, fully vaccinated should mean you've received a booster shot. That is to say, fully vaxxed means 3 shots.
Got it. Right.
We've said that on the show so often. Well, isn't that the case already? No, because CDC hasn't said so, but they need to. Number 2, stop equating all control strategy. Hand washing isn't the same as getting vaccinated.
True.
Or deep cleaning in the schools.
Oh, well, that's never been.
Didn't even mention that one. But providing the public haphazardly with a long list of controls without any order or logic is confusing and harmful. That's why that list that I sent you, that Julie Reisman put together, with vaccination and indoor mask wearing and ventilation being in green to prevent the stuff in red, is so important. Concentrate on the things that are most important, and hand washing wasn't, top of the list there. Number 3, Where all people are vaccinated, we should do away with mask mandates and distancing requirements. Okay, so interestingly, a little controversial, but sensible. Post-vaccines, if everybody's vaccinated, everybody's had their 3 shots, wear masks if you want to, but don't make it mandatory. Don't do these distancing things that people hate. Get everybody vaccinated and then let them do what they want. And most people will.
Right. I guess so. Okay. Well.
Right? Yes, ventilation still matters.
All right, true.
So concentrate on that. CDC has to update metrics for when to mask, and it isn't based on how many cases you have in a community. Mm-hmm. It's a terrible metric because it depends how often you test.
Okay.
In other words, look at it in terms of hospitals.
Yeah.
The other thing that they point out, one way masking is fine. You're having all these fights over masks. I'll tell you what, here's what you should do. Get yourself some N95s. You can get them now.
Oh, you mean the rest?
You wear the mask. It'll protect you.
Oh, okay.
And forget about what everybody else in the store is doing and stop yelling at them.
All right.
You wear your mask.
I'm for that.
Okay? If everybody wears a surgical mask, which have 70% filtration rate, the combined protection is 91% because the virus has to pass through twice. But N95s are even better than that. And if you're protected, just wear your mask and get around the fact that, a lot of people say, I don't really care what everybody else does. I just care about myself. Fine. Wear the N95 mask and don't yell at other people if they wear the N95 mask and just leave it at that.
Well, I'll do that.
You don't want to wear it? I'll wear mine.
Fair enough.
That's pretty good, actually. And it would make a lot easier to just deal with people. Make rapid antigen tests the gold standard for testing instead of PCR tests. That is to say, make those rapid antigen tests available.
Please.
Isolation periods should be reduced from 10 days to 5. Close contacts shouldn't be sent home for quarantine. Just get them tested. And if they test negative, then you get to stay.
Okay.
Right? And masks for kids in school should be optional. They don't get that sick. Concentrate on the adults.
All right. I don't know about that one, but okay.
I mean, even if you do that for under 12, right? And if you do 12 and up, you should wear masks, and the little ones, don't.
Maybe,
fine.
I guess.
If you get them all vaccinated,
yeah,
I'll take that trade.
Okay, well then that's true. Yeah, I don't know. I like the idea of making them used to it, but all right. I also like the Andy Slavitt saying, "Now is the time for unpopular action." Thanks, Greg. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We got a full hour out of Greg, and I don't know if we even squeezed in the last second of comments before he got out the door. But okay, well, there's plenty to discuss there and plenty to check up on. But I don't know. I'm going to follow up on a couple of other things instead. Oh, look, here's my coronavirus tracker for Loudoun County. Well, yeah, we've been on the increase by about 5% today. I don't know whether we really... the Omicron variant is in the area. I understand they've got their first confirmed cases in D.C. They have had them for a little while in Maryland. I assume that they are here already in Virginia, but I haven't seen an announcement yet. But, of course, by the time they make the announcement, then we'll know that the variant had been here for a couple days already, and it's too late, and we're all going to get it. So, okay. Working on getting all the ducks in a row and making sure I'm boosted. I am dedicated to that. I had to. I'll be hunting around today. Like I said, I understand that Costco has some walk-ins available for us, so I'm going to go make sure that I walk in there and better get started. So it was better to have gotten started before, but we had stupid reasons not to do it for whatever it was, and I don't know. It seemed to make sense at the time, but now it clearly doesn't. So, all right, if you're like me, get out there and get the damn thing as soon as you can because you're not fully vaccinated. I've been walking around, we walked around thinking we were fully vaccinated for quite a while, and the booster was a good idea, but I think it's probably been about, I would say, 3 to 4 weeks now that we've been pretty certain that, that third shot shouldn't be thought of as a booster. It's got to be part of the regular course of vaccination. So now my work is incomplete, and I have to go and finish it up. Let's see. Oh, something that occurred to me while we were talking with Greg, and he was reading Marcy Wheeler's article. It was funny. I put this aside for this reason. Marcy's begins her article, saying about back when I was, begging TV lawyers to do this and that and say these things because I had been thinking about them and discovered that, this formulation of the problem was important to guiding public opinion about it. Things I've done, in the past couple of years or decades, it brought, well, let me read you what I'm thinking of, and then you'll see what I'm talking about when I say the way Marcy works and the way I work. It's kind of funny to consider alongside these things. I guess, I don't know, you could argue that there's a quantum difference between us and QAnon nuts, for instance, and you would like to, but it might be a bit subjective. I don't know. I saw this comment made and widely commented upon and circulated this morning, I guess at least among people who end up in my feed, maybe not necessarily in everybody's feed, but, regular guy, Nicholas Grossman, who actually turns out to be an international relations professor at the University of Illinois, had this very interesting comment saying QAnon and anti-vax people are actually similar in that, and that's not surprising, but they're similar in that both believe that they, from their homes, figured out something that authorities and experts missed, and then logically conclude that, given the importance, if authorities and experts aren't acting as if it's real, they must be conspiring to hide it. It's a very interesting and insightful comment, and quite true, though it may prove more than he intends. And here's what I mean. The idea here that, I get what he's talking about. QAnon and anti-vax people both believe that they, from their homes, doing their own research on the internet, figured out something that authorities and experts missed. Now, unfortunately, in their case, it's that, you authorities have missed that vaccines don't actually help with disease, they hurt. And they make things worse. So Greg pointing out that Grossman is senior editor at Arc Digital, which I see in his profile, but I don't know if I know what Arc Digital is. But it's something good. He's the senior editor of it. And serious guy. I thought professor, which really should have been enough. It was enough for me, but maybe, okay. Thanks for I know that's the link to Arc Digital. If you want to tell me something, tell me what it is that you read there that you like so much. Or have we ever read it on the air where you read us one of the stories? But anyway, okay, it's a serious publication, I guess. I don't know. On the internet, no one can tell, right? So anyway, but he makes a good point. They both believe they've figured out something that the experts have missed. And, Greg says he often refers to publications or things published in Arc Digital, so I'll take his word for it. He probably has. He knew it, and as soon as he saw it, he was excited about mentioning it. So, used to be, okay. Anyway, but he's right in that the anti-vaxxers and QAnon people all think that they are in on something, that they've discovered some kind of secret that the rest of the world needs to be let in on. And I suppose, I don't know if I necessarily feel exactly the same way about the things that I do, but it occurs to me that, like, for me, and say, for instance, the promotion of the simple majority method of changing the rules in the Senate such that the filibuster is not some monster that simply can't be combated. That there was a real procedure to change filibuster rules and get at least certain things done. But really, you could get anything done depending on how you tailored your response. But, for years, people were used to being told by experts and authorities, as Nicholas puts it here, that they were wrong about the idea, or that they wanted something done, but you see the filibuster, it just gets in the way. We can't do it, and why don't you change the filibuster rule? Well, ironically, part of the filibuster rule says that in order to change the rules about the filibuster, you have to have even more votes for cloture, and so it's just an impossible problem, and we can't do anything about it. And occasionally someone would say, well, the filibuster hasn't always been there, or the threshold for cloture has changed over time, but very few people actually had ever taken note of that. It used to be 67, now it's only 60. How did they change that? Oh, well, there's a good question. But usually by that time, the senator says, I'm very busy, I have to go, and you never get the answer. And at bottom, I guess, if you really look at, for instance, what let's say we take the successful case, partially successful case of changing the rules such that filibusters could no longer shut down executive appointments and certain judicial appointments. Now all judicial appointments. We know about that and that change. So that took place. That change was made in 2013. And I spent, 10 years ahead of that time. Well, not 10 years, but several years ahead of that time, explaining, it isn't a stone wall that's immovable. It's not an immovable object. We can change the rules. It's been done before. So at bottom, though, I guess you could argue, well, the reason I came to believe that was because, looked at in a certain light, I had done my own research on the internet. So, that's should be a red flag, right? But yet there seems to be some quantum difference between what I was doing and what QAnon and anti-vax people are doing. But at the outset, everybody's thought, all three of us, I guess, if QAnon is one person and anti-vax is one person, that all three of us were crazy, right? I mean, it was absolutely the position of the mainstream press at the beginning that that's just not how this works, and you don't know what you're talking about. And everybody knows it takes 60 votes, and da-da-da. And no, it really doesn't. And if you'll just hear me out and allow, but I guess the difference here is I could point you to authorities where I had done my research on the internet, and so could QAnon, and so could anti-vax people, except at the end of the day, if you followed the links, like with QAnon, you would say, well, I don't understand. This link is to, Rainbow Pony 69 on a Reddit board. That doesn't make any sense to me. Anti-vaxxers could say, well, I'm pointing, and it's a doctor, but then now, that's a now debunked study, et cetera. But that took a lot longer. But, I guess is it fair to say, I think on its face, it's still fair to say that anti-vax material, the original anti-vax material pre-COVID, I think, was at least more convincing looking fakery, at least to lay people, than QAnon ever was. QAnon just strikes most people immediately as, well, that's baseless and crazy, and your authorities are randos. So I don't know. Whereas I guess with me, I would say my evidence that this is something that Congress can do, that the Senate can do and has done in the past, is the congressional record. And that is the official authority of what has happened in Congress before. So, I guess you could separate us that way. Similarly, Marcy Wheeler, which is how I got to all this before. She just, points to more credible sources. But I thought it was funny that, it's true that she, too, believes that from her home, she has figured out something that authorities and experts have missed. So we start out on the same footing. And I guess I thought that was funny. But I don't know if I thought it was 20 minutes funny. So, sorry about that. Give me 10 minutes back on that. Let me switch over to where I started, just because I thought that we would spend more time on this. I threatened that this would be the case. And I saw Armando tweeting Rebecca Shabbat, is that right? Shabbat's tweet that Greg mentioned earlier about her exclusive story from NBC News that I will read. And Armando commenting, in one of the first KITM shows during the Trump administration, Kagro X, that's me, by the way, and I went over this. No investigation was necessary. Just read the public documents. LOL. It was corrupt from literally day one. And we're right back where we started. I mean, I don't understand. From the outside, this must look like the experts and authorities at GSA just missed this. and that we had found from our homes something that the experts and authorities had missed. And they did miss it, but they missed it on purpose, I think. And that's what's so troubling. But again, we are starting from that place. We did find that to be the case, and I guess we did our own research on the internet, not because the internet was the only source for it. Maybe that's the difference between us and QAnon. Like, I did my research on the internet as a matter of convenience. I went to read the collections of congressional record and other documents in the Library of Congress, but I did it over the internet because that's a thing that you can do. You don't have to leave your house to do it. You used to have to leave your house to do it. Now you don't have to. Whereas QAnon people, and in some cases anti-vaxxers, particularly COVID anti-vaxxers, are doing their own research on the internet because the internet is the only place that their so-called evidence exists, because there aren't any reputable publications that will put this stuff out. And at least in the case of old-time anti-vax, no one will put it out and then leave it unretracted when they find out how bad it is. So, okay, there. I've differentiated, thankfully, between us and them. But yes, the truth of the matter is that the agency overseeing Trump's D.C. hotel lease did fail to examine ethical constitutional conflicts, according to this report. Let's read the NBC News article by Rebecca Shabbat and then yell about it a little bit, shall we? The federal agency managing the government's lease of the Trump International Hotel in Washington, D.C. failed, just plain old failed, to examine ethical conflicts and constitutional issues posed by then-President Donald Trump's refusal to divest from the property, a new congressional report says. No report necessary. I told you, Armando told you, it drove us crazy. And we reminded you with great frequency just how stupid this thing was. The House Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure actually did this. Isn't that interesting? I didn't realize they were busying themselves with that. Weren't they busier with infrastructure, you would think, than they've got lots of subcommittees. So the House Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure's report, obtained exclusively by NBC News, even though, NBC could have called me, I would have told them this. Armando would have told them, and he's free to do it. But, okay. Obtained exclusively by NBC News, found that the General Services Administration did not track foreign government payments to the hotel or identify the origins of more than $75 million in loans made by Trump and his family to shore up its troubled finances. But that's not even the chief issue. The domestic emoluments should have been the chief issue for the GSA. Even this report sucks. The GSA washed its hands of any responsibility to review whether the emoluments clauses, at least both are included here, of the Constitution were being followed, the report said, including by trying to ensure that profits from foreign governments didn't benefit Trump. The fact that they mentioned both emoluments clauses is at least a positive thing. I should read the report instead of this report on the report, because what I think we're seeing here is that Rebecca Shabbat doesn't understand. She knows that there's such a report, and I guess somehow engineered to exclusively get that report in the hands of NBC News, even though if it's a report from a government, from a congressional committee, there's no reason why it should be exclusive. The exclusive here is we're the only ones that cared so far, which is really sad. But okay, and what's happening here is Rebecca Shabbat thinks the hotter issue will be foreign emoluments, because foreign. And in some ways, that's probably true. But the real story here is that on its face, it's true that Trump was able to use the hotel to garner foreign emoluments, and that comes from the fact that he's president of the United States. And so, or was, or allegedly was. And that's a unique position, and there aren't very many government employees that would be able to leverage foreign emoluments out of this thing. But the president would be one of them, and I guess like the Secretary of State would be another. But the lease terms are supposed to prohibit any government employee, like, a clerk at the Department of Transportation can't do it. Why? Because it would generate a source of income other than his federal salary that would put that employee in the position of being able to collect illegal and unconstitutional emoluments, in a way that joining a multi-level marketing scheme wouldn't. I mean, it would if you called that an emolument, but in this case, there's no specific prohibition, for instance, in the franchising contract that says government employees can't use this thing. And here there was one, and they still ignored it. Anyway, but obviously she thinks the hotter topic is the foreign stuff, and it's really not. Well, it's very attractive as a story, certainly, but what gets me about this whole thing, and up to and including today, learning about this, is that, look, like right at the top, like job one of administering this contract is to make sure that government employees don't hold the lease, and they just blew it off. And then tried to come up with some sort of excuse like the president isn't really a government employee. So they were aware of it, and they were aware that they needed to dodge it, and they got a very, they just put together a really thin dodge. And once again, a year after this president has left office, we're now getting around to, now we have a government report that says that this was wrong and we should have done something. Well, too late now, Anyway, where were we? The agency did not take any steps to identify expenditures by foreign or domestic government officials and implemented zero checks and balances to make sure the hotel's calculations of such payments were fair, complete, and accurate, the committee found. So that's a step 2 problem. Step 1 is they didn't enforce this term of the lease. Step 2 is that when they said, right in the beginning, they said, well, look, we're not going to enforce this term of the lease. We're going to just deem the president to be not a government employee. By the way, another part owner of the hotel was Ivanka Trump, and she claimed to be a government employee too. If the president isn't a government employee because he's the president, by virtue of his unique position constitutionally somehow, well, then what do we say about people who are employed in working for him? They're not like unique and special constitutionally. Why isn't that government employee prohibited? And the answer is, I don't know. We don't want to make this guy angry. And that's it. That's the only answer. But so a job 2, they said, all right, so we're going to waive all this stupid stuff, but don't worry about violations of the emoluments clause because we're going to monitor how much money the hotel makes, and we're going to point the stuff out, and we're going to say if these things do pose a danger of violating the emoluments clauses, we're going to let you know, and we're going to recommend a certain course of action, how the president can remedy this and not violate the Constitution. And then they said, you know what? That is just annoying, and we're not going to do it. Problem 2. The hotel, located in the old post office building just down the street from the White House, and a favorite hangout for Republican lobbyists and lawmakers, that part isn't interesting. The reason that there's a GSA contract involved at all is the fact that the Trump Hotel, they didn't build their own building. They leased the old post office building. Back when, the post office was a actual government department and not a quasi-governmental whatever the hell it is now. But yeah, they had a building where they housed the post office and the postal department. And then they didn't need that anymore. And what are we going to do with this building? The government still owns it. They leased it out. They leased it to somebody who wanted to make a hotel out of it. And that somebody then got elected president. And then they said, to hell with it. So that's how come the GSA has jurisdiction over the building, by the way, in case you didn't remember that. So it's in the old post office building. Republicans like to hang out there. Now they don't because he's not the president anymore, which is why he wants to sell it. The reason he's selling it is, and that's the big irony, he's selling it. Well, why? I mean, wasn't it a big moneymaker for him? Yeah, when he was president, because people wanted to stay there because he was president. Now he's not, so they don't give a crap, and it's not really all that good of a hotel anyway, and they don't have any reason to be in Washington, which tells you that you are dealing by definition with emoluments. All the money that's being paid to the Trump Hotel is an emolument. And you don't have to try to sort out one from the other. If that's too much trouble for you, just do the only honest thing there is to do and declare that it's all emoluments and he can't have any of it. But they weren't going to do that because that would make Trump mad, so they didn't do it. So the hotel, Republicans used to like to hang out there. They reported more than $350,000 in profits from foreign government officials between 2017 and 2019. I think that's low. That's what the committee said. And the separate congressional report in October I don't know whose report that was, but it's linked. We can click through and find out who else was working on this. In October, they found that the hotel received about $3.7 million in payments from foreign governments over that rough time frame. So the Committee on Transportation says, well, between 2017 and 2019, there were $350,000 in profits from foreign governments. Somebody else, we'll click through and find out who, says, no, it was $3.7 million, which is a factor of 10 in difference, right? That link, by the way, goes to another NBC News article, also by Rebecca Shabbat. So she's been following the issue. And maybe the editors want them to focus on foreign emoluments, or maybe she's just been wrong the whole time. But that was an article from October of this year. Trump misled public about Washington hotel finances, House panel says. That was the House Oversight and Reform Committee. And what did they do? They obtained a document from the General Services Administration, which leased the old post office building to Trump for his hotel. And they found, a lot more money that was from foreign sources. And I wonder why transportation was investigating at all and why they didn't ask questions over at oversight so that they didn't reinvent the wheel at 10 times less scale. Anyway, representatives of at least 22 foreign governments, the original article says, had spent money at various Trump properties, including the hotel, during the first few years of his presidency, NBC News previously reported. Those other hotels and properties where they spent money are also impermissible foreign emoluments. They just don't come with the additional responsibility of the General Services Administration to make sure that this wasn't happening. Anyway, even though the hotel, quote, consistently profited from foreign government patronage, it lost more than $71 million overall between its soft opening in September of 2016 and this past January when Trump left office, the new report noted. The hotel operated at a loss in 33 out of 53 months during that 4-year period, it said, and that's pretty incredible. And so for those people who think Trump has the golden Midas touch, no, it's the everything Trump touches dies thing. At work again. In order to keep the struggling hotel afloat, Trump and 3 of his adult children, Don Jr., Eric, and Ivanka Trump, loaned it more than $75 million, ultimately forgiving about $72 million of those loans, the report said. The hotel, in contrast, repaid less than $3.5 million of those loans. That's not in contrast. That's the other side of the same equation. This is just, I think I might not respect Rebecca Shabbat. I don't know. This is not good. I mean, am I reading this wrong? The Trump kids loaned them $75 million, ultimately forgiving $72 million of those loans, right? Which means that there's $3 million or so difference. They didn't forgive $3 million. And then it says the hotel, in contrast, repaid less than $3.5 million of the loans, which would be, what's less than $3.5 million? Well, about $3 million is less than $3.5 million. That's what they repaid. Yeah, I know. That's not in contrast. That's actually a description of the same math you just told me, that they loaned them 75 and forgave 72. All right. I mean, what can I tell you? Although the loans came from companies created to hold the Trump family's financial interests in the hotel, GSA never made any effort to identify the origin of these loans and whether the ultimate source of the financing posed any constitutional concerns, the report said. They did. I mean, but on so many levels that it's hard to even parse out what do they mean here. Like, they made no effort to find out the source of the $75 million loans. I mean, it is right here. Don Jr., Eric, and Ivanka. I guess there is some question about, like, well, where did they get $75 million to loan to the hotel and then just lose? And one answer for people who believe that the Trump families are legit billionaires is, well, they have billions of dollars. That's how they did it. But the Trumps typically, I don't think, just burn $75 million at a time, but yeah, they can lose it over time. I guess, though, it's a legit question given the suspicions we have about the family. Like, did Russian people give you $75 million that, when you needed to prop up the hotel and you were just a pass-through? That's an important question. Did GSA ever ask? No. Too complicated for us. And I mean, it is, granted, it's not GSA's beat ordinarily to try and suss out money laundering, but they might not be expert in it. But I will say this: that's why the terms of the lease, statutorily speaking, when they put this building up, and they had to authorize its leasing by private entities, that's why they said you can't lease it to any government officials, because the temptation for emoluments and money laundering are just too great. Laundering would just be to cover up the emoluments. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I had a little problem there at the beginning. I hit the button to get back on the air and realized I had not muted during the break. I just didn't say anything, so I didn't notice that I was not muted. So then I hit the button and muted myself instead of unmuting myself. Anyway, you have every right to be annoyed and angry about what's going on at GSA, and I'm going to needle you further about it by continuing with this article, because it astonishes me at every paragraph, quite honestly. All right, so where were we? Right, they actually lost money. They had to put money in. They can't tell the difference between one equation and another. Although the loans came from companies, created to hold the Trump family's financial interests, the GSA never bothered to figure out what the origin of these loans were, which, again, we kind of excuse them because this isn't their usual beat, except they don't usually, although, well, I don't know. I mean, they did used to be the General Accounting Office, so maybe some forensic accounting experience might be resident inside the agency, and maybe you would think that they would have that skill to make sure that there weren't people engaged in government contracting. And government contracting attracts a lot of sometimes shady people, or at least people who then engage in shady activity, sometimes purposely, sometimes not. But if they are in the business of auditing government contracting, they should be familiar with this stuff. So maybe they do have resident experts on this. But, one of the stopgap measures that was supposed to limit the amount of work that they would have to do with regard at least to the lease of this hotel was in the contract, don't lease it to any government officials, and then that way you'll have less to worry about. You might find that there are government officials who have created straw companies so that they can evade that prohibition, but generally speaking, I doubt it. I mean, it just probably wasn't a big concern at the outset that, mid-level government employees or even high-level government employees are going to, surreptitiously, through straw companies, get into the hotel business or whatever. It didn't have to be leased for a hotel, but the idea that the Secretary of Commerce was going to say, as a side hustle, I'm going to lease the old post office building. But, they were concerned enough about it to put it in the contract. So, and then just ignore it. So you tell me, were they concerned or were they not? I don't know. I guess not, apparently. Anyway, where were we? In addition, while Trump transferred his ownership of the hotel to a trust controlled by his eldest son, Donald Trump Jr., who was advising him on the insurrection, a longtime Trump Organization chief financial officer Alan Weisselberg after the 2016 election. So Trump Jr., or Don Jr. and Weisselberg get Don Sr.'s interest, apparently. So even though that happened, the report said Trump's refusal to divest his financial interest in the hotel was problematic and created multiple conflicts of interest during his presidency that both he and GSA refused to properly address. For example, the report noted that political appointees at GSA were responsible for making federal real estate decisions, quote, that impacted the president's personal properties as well as that of his competitors. Democrats on the committee prepared the report after receiving 14,000 pages of new records from GSA that they had requested 2 years earlier, but were not handed over during the Trump administration, including previously unreleased financial records from the hotel. What that means, by the way, is that there should have been contempt of Congress proceedings going on for years prior to any of this having to do with the January 6th committee. Those people at GSA should have been getting held in contempt of Congress years ago for their refusal to turn over the 14,000 pages of records that were requested by the committee. In a statement provided to NBC News, committee chair Peter DeFazio, now retiring, said the report, quote, brings to light GSA's flagrant mismanagement of the old post office lease and its attempt to duck its responsibility to support and defend the U.S. Constitution's emoluments clauses, unquote. I mean, congratulations on getting that right 5 years after, those of us who did our own research on the internet were able to figure this out, but whatever. We're all supposed to have a big party for him now that he's retiring. GSA kept the American people in the dark about the poor financial health of the hotel, and most importantly, who was spending money at the hotel and how it might be influencing the Trump administration, he said. Hadoy. The report also found that the GSA did not take action to respond to a specific Inspector General recommendation that it revise a provision of certain leases, which ones, that specified, you'll never believe what it specified. Are you ready for this one? It specified government officials could not be a party to them by dramatic music, please. When did they discover that? Wow. The GSA did not take action to respond to a specific Inspector General recommendation that it revise a provision of certain leases that specified government officials could not be a party to them by removing ambiguity related to the emoluments clauses of the Constitution. What is this linking to, by the way? It is something from the GSA Inspector General, gsaig.gov. Appendix 6, Management Decisions Revised or with which the Inspector General is in disagreement. There's a whole report on this thing. What am I even looking at? I don't know. I'm deep in the appendices here. But at any rate, okay. There you go. Back to the article. Where did we drop off from this? Okay. Rather than removing the ambiguity of the provision, the agency inexplicably expanded the ethical gaps, leaving even fewer guardrails to prevent conflict of interest among senior federally elected officials, including the President of the United States, the committee said. Despite the hotel's financial troubles, the Trump's hotel company recently reached an agreement to sell the rights to the hotel for $375 million, the Wall Street Journal reported last month. Why would you pay anything for a troubled hotel? The report said that Miami-based investment firm CGI Merchant Group, now you're supposed to go and look who is that person and what are they trying to get out of the sale, is in contract to acquire the hotel lease and reached a deal to have the Hilton's Waldorf Astoria Group brand and manage the property. CNN reported Tuesday that the Trump Organization formally notified the GSA about its proposed sale of the property. Why? Because they had to. So that one they complied with, because it would jeopardize their ability to get the money, I guess, if they didn't do this. The GSA and Trump Organization did not immediately return NBC News' request for comment on the committee's findings and reports on the sale of the hotel. CGI Merchant Group also did not immediately respond to a request for comment. In October, a House Oversight and Reform Committee report, mentioned in the other linked article, found Trump provided misleading information about the financial situation of the hotel, basing the findings on documents obtained from the GSA. The panel found that Trump reported that his hotel generated $150 million in income while he served in the White House, despite its incurring more than $70 million in losses, disclosures that grossly exaggerated the financial health of the Trump hotel. After he was elected, Trump vowed to donate foreign profits from the hotel to the U.S. Treasury as a way to avoid violating the emoluments clauses. In February of 2018, his company said it had given over $150,000, also claiming in response to critics in Congress that foreign profits had been overstated. According to the new House committee report, however, while the Trump Organization commenced its voluntary initiative to annually donate the profits, the GSA made no attempt whatsoever to oversee the efforts to ensure those profits were transparent. Representative Dina Titus, Democrat of Nevada, chairwoman of the subcommittee that oversees the GSA, said she wants Congress to change how the GSA leases out federal government property to institute greater accountability and reform, and that she will be working to bring more transparency to the process. It's hard to blame her for wanting to do so, but what do you think the person who made it such that the GSA's lease says we cannot lease this to government employees meant by including that? Probably that person thought that this would institute greater accountability and reform, and that they were working to bring more transparency to the process. But now you're going to bring even more transparency to the process. I don't know. Maybe Dina Titus is up to the job and they'll do something that has teeth. But I mean, if the GSA just says, we're just effing not going to do this job, then your job becomes prosecuting or seeing to it that someone prosecutes the people who refuse to do the job. But you didn't do that because, I don't know, because you're busy, so whatever. The report proposes some legislative remedies for its findings, including requiring that certain leases include audit rights for both the GSA and its Inspector General. It also proposes that Congress try to hone any ambiguity in lease language by banning the GSA administrator or designee from entering into a lease that doesn't, at a minimum, include a prohibition on any federally elected official or cabinet member to share, participate in, or benefit from it. But it already says that. What are you talking about? So the report proposes that Congress try to hone any ambiguity in lease language by banning the GSA administrator or designee from entering into a lease that doesn't include a prohibition. I mean, the lease does include a prohibition. I don't know. Maybe it just says this lease, the rule is you can't lease this to a government employee. And they said, well, I'm going to. And so now they say, well, what we'll do is we'll add language that says you're banned from doing that. But I mean, the initial language was supposed to mean that you're banned from doing that. But I guess this would impose some sort of personal penalty, potentially, on a GSA administrator or inspector general who says, I'm doing it anyway. Maybe that's good. Maybe that is actually progress. I don't know. I just find the whole thing so incredibly irritating. I just don't know what to tell you about. Well, how am I supposed to nail this stuff down? This is what we wanted to prevent. There was a law in place to prevent it, and you just blew it off. And now what we'll do is, why don't we add another law on top of this that says you can't blow it off? But what happens if somebody blows that law off? I don't know. Jeez, I hadn't thought of that. I don't know. I mean, you're just going to have to start executing people, I guess, because as harsh and terrible as it is, what can I tell you? Something you got to do. Maybe execution is the wrong thing. Jail term. That should be fine. But there's just no, I don't know, there's no will to enforce this stuff. There's a will, the responsible parties in Congress are more than happy to say they're legislating to do something to stop the problem. But it's just, I don't know, they just keep layering more and more unenforced crap on top of things. And it's because nobody goes to jail. Maybe it would be enforced if the GSA administrator who decided that they just didn't feel like doing this stuff went to jail. I don't know. Maybe it wouldn't make any difference whatsoever. But that's really what ought to be happening. And I know, I think probably Armando agrees. I'll just speak for Armando on this. He loves it when other people put words in his mouth. I'll try that. Okay. Well, anyway, that's just crazy. What can I tell you? Here's something else that Greg has passed along, by the way, for inclusion in the show. The tweet from Scott McFarlane, who says, in a new request for release from jail, January 6th, defendant Robert Morse, M-O-R-S-S, is that the correct spelling? Makes a provocative argument, and it is that is the correct spelling. That is provocative. Here's the provocative argument for real. Whatever transpired once they arrived at the Capitol, the protesters were entitled, and I love that pronunciation of it, were entitled to do as the president directed. Government agents may have been involved in the riot's creation. A little note of caution on that one because, they still think that that might mean anything. That might mean anything from the government sent agents on behalf of the president to tell us to storm the Capitol, all the way up to there were agents provocateurs in the crowd, and they were FBI plants looking to entrap MAGA supporters, and they urged us to break into the Capitol, and now they're coming to arrest us for doing the thing that they said we should be doing. It could mean either one of those two things. But either way, the excuse probably shouldn't fly. This is for a screen capture, I guess, from the court pleadings. Whatever transpired once they arrived at the Capitol, the protesters were entitled to do as the president directed. Many details of the ensuing interactions between the protesters turned rioters and the assembled police are, at present, still unclear, but indicators are emerging that significantly diminished the government's narrative of a ravening mob attacking a brave contingent of law enforcement dutifully defending democracy. That's true. There are questions being raised, but the questions are being raised about, were there some cops who were on the side of the rioters, and should they be fired? Anyway, in fact, the riot's progress may have been significantly influenced by the government. There does not appear to be much informed disagreement at this juncture that the law enforcement failed to mount a professional response to the possibility of unrest consequent to the Stop the Steal protest. Recent media accounts, however, also suggest that government agents may have been involved in the riot's creation and progress. So yes, I think this is actually leaning more towards the theory that there were agents provocateurs in there, not so much that there were federal agents in the crowd urging people to do the president's bidding by following his instruction to storm the Capitol and possibly hang Mike Pence. Anyway, let's see. There's more. There's other things. Let me jump back to Pocket and see what else I had in store for you, because there's plenty of stuff. There's that one. Jim Jordan thing, which we talked about. Oh, yes, right. Greg mentioned to you yesterday about the unrest, let's say, in Saxony, and the plot by Saxon radicals to attack the chancellor over COVID-19 measures. And I just want to note for the record that it's an international thing. Of course, we've had our own problems with that here in the United States. But yes, it's metastasized and we have problems abroad. Not just in Saxony, but this also, The Hill actually has a finger on the world pulse with all this, because I think Greg got his news about Saxony from The Hill. They also have this piece yesterday. Group handcuffs principal in Greece, like, the country. Suggests he be arrested for enforcing COVID-19 measures. So that's kind of interesting and weird. A group of people handcuffed a school principal in Greece and took him into a police station, saying he should be arrested for enforcing COVID measures at the school. The group, which calls itself the Guardians of the Constitution, how do you like that, believed officers would arrest the principal for violating the Constitution once they brought him to the police station. The New York Times reported. Instead, officers arrested the 11 members of the group for alleged abduction of the principal, along with other lesser charges. Well, they got it right in Greece. We can't seem to get that correct here in the United States. Reminder that we were just talking yesterday about the update in that weird case where the former police officer, and it turns out a former police captain, I don't think we knew he was a captain, had stopped that air conditioner contractor's van on suspicion of voter fraud of some kind. And that guy, at least, he got himself arrested too. But so we did get that one right. But the idea, lots of these January 6th protesters are insisting that they were there to effect citizens' arrests as well. Of course, some of them insist they were there to effect citizens' executions, and we don't ordinarily allow that. The arrest comes a week after Greece's government passed a new law under which parents who keep their children out of school due to COVID measures could face up to 2 years in prison, according to the Times. Well, that's the way Greece decided to handle it. It's not my business. Roughly 62% of the people in Greece are fully vaccinated as the government continues to put measures in place to press individuals to get inoculated against COVID-19, per the Times. The Times is perhaps the source we should be reading on this, but I appreciate the brevity of the Hill on the question. In November, the Greek Prime Minister announced that those aged 60 or older and are not vaccinated will soon have to pay monthly fines. I felt the duty to stand by the most vulnerable, even if it might temporarily displease them. Prime Minister, why did I start this? Kyriakos Mitsotakis. Not too bad. Kyriakos Mitsotakis said when announcing the measures. Everybody knows now the Prime Minister of Greece, Kyriakos Mitsotakis. I had a friend in high school whose name was Kyriakos, so not too terribly foreign to me, although, well, I don't know, it is foreign. But anyway, I'm familiar with it. Not foreign in the sense that it comes from overseas, but the unfamiliar sense. Okay, other things to read. Gosh, there's a lot. What's this? Why did I put this? Oh, yes, right. That was I included it in yesterday's roundup, I think. I might have given it to Scott a little bit late, but I mentioned on the air yesterday about the weird Michigan statute about that might somehow implicate some of Trump's activities with respect to his attacks on the governor there. I might as well read this and let you know. But I got it from Andrew Fleischman. Who's Andrew Fleischman? Let's see. His bio says, I work on behalf of the wrongfully or unfairly convicted for Ross and Pines. Okay, so I guess a lawyer. And he commenting in his tweet from the 14th. So what's that? Tuesday? Holy crap, although he uses the other word for it. This is wildly unconstitutional, he says. If you post something true but unflattering about someone else, knowing that it might cause other people to contact them electronically in an upsetting way, and they do, it's a felony. And truth, the truth of the matter that you say, is not a defense. That is kind of interesting. He includes a tweet from, who is this? Casey Helton, Red County Rabble Rouser, I guess. At any rate, her tweet was, the Livingston County Sheriff's Department has filed a criminal complaint against me related to the Twitter posts I made this week about the nurses who publicly spread health misinformation. She's got a whole thread here. I was contacted by the sheriff's deputy this afternoon to notify me of the charges pursuant to this Michigan statute, the one to which the previous tweet refers. But Casey, telling her story, says, I do not yet have a copy of the report, so I can't comment further regarding the details at this time, but it is a felony if charged and convicted. The case has been forwarded to the Livingston County Prosecutor's Office for review, I'm told. The posts I have made about these nurses and about my local chapter of Moms for Liberty pertain to their public activism of the quote-unquote movement, their word, made in public social media posts and public government meetings. At no point have I attempted to contact or encourage others to contact any of the parties involved. I have not approached any of these folks when in a public setting. I have not shared any private information that was not included in their already public posts. Frankly, I'm shocked that the LCSD would play a role in this naked attempt to undermine my free speech rights guaranteed by the First Amendment. Yeah, that actually would be an application of it. And silence dissenters of life-threatening public policy measures during a deadly pandemic. Updates to follow. The tweet she's talking about, let's see, here's one of them where she's tweeting a video of a public meeting of some kind. It looks like a local one. Hey, Twitter, I'm back. I'd like you to meet Nurse Rebecca, oh boy, what's this last name? Skozalis, I don't know, Skoczzylas. You tell me how that goes. Who, like Holly Austin, also spread misinformation at the Brighton Board of Education meeting. I'm calling her Nurse E. coli because she's full of you know what. Okay. So that's what she's tweeting. Basically, she observed public comment at a Board of Education meeting from people who identified themselves as nurses and is like, well, you're giving out bad information. So she's been contacted by the Livingston County Sheriff's Department in Michigan and told that she's on the hook for a felony. Andrew Fleischman is the one saying, gosh, this is wildly unconstitutional. And truth, not a defense. And here's some screenshots of the full section here from the Michigan Penal Code. Let's see, Act 328 of 1931. This can't be about electronic communications, though, from 1931, can it? I guess the original act is. But they've added this. Section 750.411S. Posting message through electronic medium. Prohibitions, penalty, exceptions, and definitions. Section 411S. It's very detailed and it's very long, and I guess the important part is what he's highlighted here. Unconsented contact means any contact with another individual that is initiated or continued without that individual's consent or in disregard of that individual's expressed desire that the contact be avoided or discontinued. Unconsented contact includes any of the following: following or appearing within sight of the victim, approaching or confronting the victim in a public place or private property, appearing at a victim's workplace or residence. You know, get the idea of what all the things that would be prohibited by this. Fleischman goes on to say, it's not even a defense that someone is a public official. So if I say the governor of Michigan sucks, and that causes all of those rabid Fleischophiles, the people who are followers of Andrew Fleischman here, out there to DM her, the governor, that she sucks, they can get me by long arm statute, and put me in prison. Long arm of the law can put me in prison. That is to say, it can extend liability to him. It looks like the statute has withstood First Amendment challenges, which is just baffling in light of, how federal courts interpret the First Amendment. And he has some, citations about the statute actually surviving challenge. By the way, please don't tell anyone that the Michigan Court of Appeals, that they must have been high off their ass when they wrote this opinion, because I could go to prison then, I suppose. I mean, in this case, they do get around to saying that the court has to decide if the speech is constitutionally protected. He's citing a case here and showing screen grabs of it. But it's an insane case-by-case way that is bound to create chilling effects. It's like they made incitement to crime, except without any requirement that your conduct be likely to cause imminent lawless action. So yeah, apparently just commenting online somewhere, if you do it and I guess you have and can prove that you have reason to know that someone else will read it and then bother the person about whom you are talking afterwards, that you could be the one in trouble, in addition, I guess, to the other person who shows up at the other person's house. But if you wrote the article that incites that person to go to that person's house, even if you don't call for that to happen, apparently you can be bothered with it too. I imagine that's rather selectively enforced, like in the case of Casey Helton. So kind of weird, but I guess now some questions about whether or not Trump's texting about Gretchen Whitmer and the need to teach her some sort of a lesson could be said to have incited those people who attempted to abduct and murder her. And why can't we have the, whether Livingston County or any other sheriff's department, file those charges against the former so-called president of the United States? Well, there's really no reason, except that they don't want to. And they only want to do it against people who called out nurses giving out COVID misinformation at the Board of Education meetings. How odd. I guess it's a little bit like being called out by YouTube for reading articles debunking COVID misinformation because they contain COVID misinformation for the purposes of debunking. All right, a million things we didn't get to. Things are beginning to pile up now, but I think we need to spend some particular amount of time on the failure of everybody to grasp the emoluments clauses and why they are of importance. Everyone from the GSA to the members of Congress investigating what the GSA didn't do, to the reporters reporting on the reports of the Congress people investigating why the GSA didn't do what it was supposed to do. Everybody fails in this one, just like the Inspector General of the DOD fails in his, Con Law 101 understanding of whether or not unconstitutional laws are the same thing as stuff that's required by the Constitution but I don't like. Nah, it doesn't really work that way. Huge failure. But time now to hand things over to Justice Putnam to catalog other failures from around the country and around the world.
NetworksRadio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
What in particular are those grievances? All right, well, let's see. Let's skip down to some other things that we haven't talked about yet. A Houston-based oil company and two subsidiaries indicted for a crude oil spill that fouled Southern California beaches in October. I'm sure that those of you in Southern California who saw those beaches despoiled are glad to hear about that.